Braden, all I'm going to buy you for Christmas is merch.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dowler-Coltman, joined by Elliot Tanti and Braden Dowler-Coltman. We are back for another busy episode. We've got lots to get to, lots to discuss. Busy day in sports, busy weekend in sports, and just overall lots and lots of drama and storylines from around the sporting world. We're going to get to many of those this week. First, I guess I should turn it over to these two guys, give them a moment to say hello to their loved ones. How are you doing, guys? And any shout outs you want to make as we get this one rolling?
Yeah, good. Happy to be here. Awesome. A shout out to my fiance, Ale, whose birthday it is today.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know what that's called, Braden? That's called teeing it up.
Happy birthday, Ale.
Happy birthday, Ale. All right, here we go. This is topic one. Okay. Well, let's get right to it. Big news, big story, big drama coming out of a very early race in the F1 finale from Abu Dhabi this morning. If you were up as I was at the crack of dawn, prior to the crack of dawn, frankly, to watch it live, or you watched it on PVR, or maybe you didn't watch it, you just watched the highlights because I don't know why you would do that, but some people did. The point being, this was an incredibly dramatic, incredibly controversial end to what has been an incredibly dramatic and incredibly controversial season for F1. The two championship leaders, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, came into it deadlocked, tied. We talked a lot about this a couple of days ago on our other podcast on this feed, the Pit Stop podcast with Braden. We had our guest, Tyler Walzak. We all broke it down. We were all excited, mostly just for the drama that we knew would unfold. And it didn't disappoint, but it was less, I think, about the quality of the racing that led to the drama and more the way in which the drama unfolded. Lewis Hamilton took a great lunge at the very beginning of the race, took the lead, and he led the race all the way through until the last 10 laps when Canadian driver Nicholas Latifi found the wall, leading to a safety car, during which the Red Bull driver, who was further back in the pack, Max Verstappen, was able to pit. He chose to pit because he knew if there was going to be a chance, he'd need some help to get to Lewis. Lewis chose not to pit, or his team chose not to pit because they were afraid that the safety car might be left out, and that's how the race would finish. So to give up track position could be deadly. They chose not to do that. They were left with old tires. And then all hell broke loose in the very last two laps. Some very strange and some very unorthodox decisions were made. We'll get into that in a second, but suffice to say, Max Verstappen was given an opportunity on the very last lap to attack. He had fresh tires. Lewis was handicapped by his older tires and was unable to defend. Max snuck ahead, stole the lead right off the nose of Lewis Hamilton, who was less than a lap away from becoming an 8-time world champion, the first 8-time world champion in auto sports history. There has never been an 8-time champion in NASCAR. There has never been an 8-time champion in Formula One. There's never been an 8-time champion in rally racing. So this would have been history. It was history a different way. The Dutch young gun winning his first world championship. All right. That is my long-winded, but as detailed as I could possibly make it for those who didn't get up at 5 a.m. to get it. Let me turn it over to my compatriots here. Braden, I know you watched this race. I know you were excited for this race coming in. I'm sure that as the laps ticked away, you had expectations of what was going to happen, and then they were all flipped on their head. How do you feel?
Well, it's funny you asked me how I feel, because in your long-winded explanation, you didn't even let anyone know how you feel. But I know the minute that all hell broke loose in the last two laps, you were incensed, as I'm sure everyone else was, when it came to how this thing ended. I'm frustrated, I guess, as everybody. So the last two laps, just before when Latifi had his accident, Hamilton had an 11-second lead. There was no reason. There was just no way that Verstappen was going to be able to get back into this. How am I feeling? Frustrated, but there's also a big part of me that's like, it's frustrating because I think that Max Verstappen, should be recognized for his great great season. He had a really, really great season, and he was a championship driver. But it's going to be forever marred now by the fact that this came down to a caution flag and the way that the safety car ended this race. It's hard to watch, and it's hard to watch, I think, too, because now there's even more fans watching this and going, is this how this always like this can't be right. There's a mess up here.
Elliot?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of disagree. I mean, is there no way that Max Verstappen gets back into the race? Well, there was a way. It was through a caution and two laps of a safety car. It was incredible luck. It was the luck of a generation, but he got it. And I mean, to your point, you've got all these people watching this sport for the first time ever and super invested. It comes down to the last race of the year. If the last race of the year ends with the safety car completing the last lap, as opposed to the two finalists having one last lap showdown, it is a much better story for F1. It's much better for people who are new to the sport, newly engaged with it.
Yeah.
And so I disagree. I think, and I don't think this is the race didn't end with the safety car. There was one last lap of racing,
but it should have.
But but if it did, that would have been an awful, atrocious way to end the season.
Sure, but then Elliot, so Connor McDavid gets tripped on a breakaway, and there's no call, and that's how the game ends. Well, but that's my point. Is that how it should end? There's a clear infraction of the rules here.
Yeah, of course. But what I'm saying is that it's much better that it ended with one last.
So
lap
it's
of
more
racing
about the narrative
and
the sanctity of. So the Houston Astros should win because it's a lot more fun for the fans instead of them banging on the things and cheating.
Yeah, I love the Astros, man.
All right, so let me jump in here because, as Braden said, I tried really hard to sort of hold my emotion back for the intro, but I am incensed. I'm still frustrated. I've been angry all day. To be honest with you, I'm less than angry now, and I'm more just sad. I'm disappointed because this is a sport I've invested a lot of emotional energy in the last year, 2-3 years. And I was disappointed by the way in which this unfolded. Not that Max won. I was prepared going into the race that it was very likely Max was going to win.
Tied.
I would have been fine with that. Was I cheering for Lewis? Certainly. I was excited for the opportunity for him to grab history in the way he was poised to do. I was impressed with how he drove the entire race up to that point. And the fact is, at the end of the day, the way this race was decided was not under the same set of guidelines that have ended every other race in F1 history. Let me explain what I mean by that. So Elliot's right. Is it more fun to watch two guys go head to head in the last lap? Yes. If they're on even footing. They weren't. You've handicapped one driver because he made decisions and his team made decisions based on the rules as they knew them. Their expectation is that the same standards are going to be applied to this safety car that has been applied to every other 100, if not thousands of safety cars that Lewis Hamilton has driven behind during his career. What do I mean by that? Rule 48 of the FIA's governing document for the way Formula One is run states that during a safety car ending, there is a procedure that should go as follows. Lapped cars or back markers who have gotten caught up in the queue shall be given the opportunity to unlap themselves, meaning that they will pass the safety car and gun it around the track to get back to the back of the pack as fast as possible, with one lap following that before the safety car is returned. So those are the two pieces here that I want to focus in on. Number one, only 4 of the back markers were allowed to pass Lewis Hamilton and the safety car. Only the 4 between him and Max Verstappen. There were 3 more back markers right behind Max Verstappen who were not given the same opportunity. So already right there, the first part of this rule has been, let's say, reinterpreted. Then the second piece of it being that there shall be an additional safety car lap to ensure that those cars can safely make it to the back of the pack was not followed. Those cars were given the opportunity to leave, and less than half a lap later, during the same lap, the safety car was removed from the track. So right then again, the wording of that rule has been reinterpreted twice. And that for me is where I start going, this is what's frustrating. There appears to be a decision that was made by Michael Massey, the race director, and the stewards room to ensure that the last lap of this race would be run under green, regardless of the fact that it was in violation of their own sporting code. And that for me is the problem. This is different, Braden, than Connor McDavid on a breakaway being tripped. This is more like a tripping infraction being called at center ice. And instead of just giving the penalized team 2 minutes, you're also pulling their goalie while they're in the lead.
Yeah, so you're saying it's even further.
I guess the entire structure of what the rule book is to give an advantage, whether intentional or not, to one driver. And the reason Max Verstappen had the addition of fresh tires was because he was so far back that by that point it was a free pit stop. They were just gambling. Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes chose not to do that, not because they didn't think it was the right thing to do, because they knew that they would lose or expected that they would lose if they had done it. Yeah. And then they were put on the back foot. So I agree with Elliot. Would it have been fun to have a shootout between these two guys on the last lap? Yes, but it should have been on even footing. It should not have been one guy with old tires and one guy with fresh tires, because it was never going to be a fair fight. And that for me is where I feel like Max didn't win this race. He was given this race by the stewards. The stewards chose or dictated how this was. And in my opinion, officiating should never decide a championship. If it does, that's when we have to start looking at what is wrong. And in this case, it just doesn't pass the smell test.
This is my frustration when it comes to what you're saying with the difference in sport, is that in most major sport, fans are, like we've talked about before, there's a lot of officiating that goes kind of sideways, but fans know generally, sticks up on the hands, that's an infraction. We know what that is. There are so many goddamn rules in the FIA that if they're so out there and they don't if they don't comply by them, or they don't, adhere to them the way that they're written and the way that they're generally understood, then it becomes even more confusing and frustrating for fans who are just trying to figure out this new sport.
All those points are really well made and right in terms of the intricacies of the F1. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Hamilton was given an opportunity to fend off Verstappen for one lap, and he couldn't deliver. And that's why Verstappen won.
Not on fair footing. That's like saying, okay, we're gonna have an overtime period with 3 guys, but one team, all their skates are going to be dulled. That's what this is about.
Yeah, but I get that. But Verstappen they played their hand exactly perfectly right given the circumstances that occurred. Mercedes by chance,
did not. They just got lucky, and they had a free opportunity to do it.
I know,
but they had a free opportunity to do it because they were losing the race by 11 seconds.
I get you're completely right in this. I'm not arguing that you're not right, but ultimately it came down to one lap of racing in the last.
But it wasn't racing. I don't call that racing. Racing. It's not fair footing. No, it wasn't.
It was racing.
It's not though. It's not.
But this is sort of what, if I've come to learning anything about F1, is that nothing makes sense and no one ever follows the rules. That's exactly what racing is.
It's racing, man.
It's all about that. That is what racing is. It's all about bending the rules and
constantly trying to change.
It's constantly a problem, right?
So let me say something. Let me say something to that.
Different than there's tons of examples of this throughout the history of F1. Someone's always pushing the boundaries. The stewards are always involved, and it always is causing problems. And I get that, but
here's the difference. Here's the difference. No, but here's the difference, and I do agree with you on that point. And even earlier in this race, there was a situation where Max came in hard on Lewis, and he was forced out wide, and he ended up taking a position well off the track. Usually you have to give that position back. The stewards decided in that situation that Max pushed him off. Now that's very subjective.
Well, they did say that he got advantage back. They said he gave him enough time. They slowed down. Sure.
My point being, Elliot's right in the fact that there is a lot of space in between the lines of a lot of these rules for interpretation. That is why there is a room full of stewards who are racing experts who make these judgment calls. The same way as Braden pointed out, officiating is still a human error situation, right? People either see things, they don't see things.
You just call them experts.
But here's the thing. This isn't about a driver pushing the rules to the limit. This is the governing body, the structure, the integrity of this sport is being called into question today, because what appears to have happened was that the race director made a decision that was more about the entertainment value of the the sport and less about the competitive integrity of it. And that is what I am frustrated by. This race should have finished under a safety car, just as every other race, almost exclusively for the history of F1 that has had a crash this severe in the last 10 laps has finished under safety car. Would it have been a little bit less dramatic? Yes. But guess what? It should have been done that way because it would have been right. It would have been fair.
Better.
And this is the other thing. Officiating.
You're saying it's a marketing ploy.
This is better.
I'm not saying it's a ploy. I'm just saying officiating should always side on the conservative option. They should always take the safer choice. Why? Because they may get criticized for it, but at least they are not affecting the outcome of the event as an outside body.
But
this is the same as like, no, Jordan, it's not better though, Elliot. It's not.
There will be more people listening. There will be more controversy next year. You know, there's going to be fire between Red Bull and Mercedes. Yeah. And you know what? The season 3 of Drive to Survive is going to be Oscar the most massive Netflix event ever. You cannot tell me. I know as a racing fan, as someone who follows the rules and is deeply invested in what is correct, because you're a good man and you have a good heart, this frustrates you. But this is better for F1 in the whole
I don't think it is, though. I really don't. Because again, it's about the integrity of your sport. You look back at baseball, you can't tell me the steroids era was good for baseball. Because when you look back at it now, just for a second though, Elliot, in the moment, Mark McGuire, just listen though, let me make my point. In the moment, Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa were great for TV. They were great for what would have been at the time Netflix documentaries. They were great for ESPN. They were great for all the coverage surrounding the game. They got more eyeballs watching baseball than ever before. But what is the legacy, the lasting legacy of that? It has tarnished the sport. Now we look back at that period of time and we go, how on earth did this go on? How on earth did we let this happen? And what I am saying is that although it may be good in the short term for TV ratings, this calls into question the integrity of the sport moving forward. Every championship that is this close moving forward is now open to interpretation. I don't like that.
I don't think that anyone thinks that F1 or the FIA is a wholesome, perfect board, like
I'm not saying
organization. No one thinks that. Season. Now, the difference when you're bringing up the steroid era is that everyone was lying about no one knew what was going on. Everyone knows exactly what's going on here. They didn't want the last race of the year to end on a safety car. They wanted to have one more lap of race.
And that's wrong.
It's different. It's different.
It shouldn't be a decision made in that moment.
I know I won't disagree with you on the fundamentals of what you're saying. I'm just saying it's fun. It's better for the sport. It's better for the sport.
I don't think it is. It might be better for the entertainment part of the sport, Elliot. I think that's true, but only because it creates controversy.
Pissed off about it.
But that's what I mean. I would also tell you, like, if you look at the majority of the response to this, I don't think this is good for the sport. I think this has a lot of people looking at this and going, how could you let this happen? How could you allow yourself, and more importantly, the one person you've put in charge of this entire thing, to make a decision? And the other part of it is the way in which it happened was it was just so wrong on so many levels. He made one call. He said they weren't going to let them unlap. And less than 30 seconds later on the same lap, he changed his mind.
But Christian Horner was giving it to him. He was saying they've got to get going.
You can't. I know. Then where's your impartiality?
But do you think the majority of people following this story this week, the majority of people in the world, are as invested in this sport as you guys are? I don't think that changes. I don't think that changes. So but for someone like me who says, like, if that race had ended on a friggin' safety car, you guys,
then the correct driver who had won that race from start to finish should have won that race.
I would have been like, why am I watching this?
Why am I watching this? Fairly?
That's the rule.
He kept the position fairly. He kept the position fairly. The Red Bull had not found a way to answer under the standard rules with an opportunity there. And then all of a sudden, literally the hand of God came in, rearranged the cards and said, here you go, Max. It's on a platter for you. He was a sitting duck. Then he would not have been a sitting duck under the standard that has been set every other race for the history of the sport. And all of a sudden, the interpretation was flipped on its head and changed. And I just don't think that is right. That's what I'm saying.
You're right.
Same way, let me put it this way. Right. Did Brett Hall have his foot in the crease?
Yes.
Correct. He did. And if the wrong team won that year, right? Was the puck over the line when Calgary was playing Tampa Bay? Yes, it
Yes.
was. The wrong team won that year. And good. Max Verstappen's world champion. They're probably not going to be able to take that away from him no matter how many court challenges Mercedes wants to do. That's just the reality of it. But as Braden said, I said I was sad, and I am. I'm now a little bit more angry because you've pushed me back to that place, and that's okay. I was really angry earlier today. I let myself sit on it, and then I just felt sad. And the reason I felt sad, to finish here, was that number one, I didn't think that the way that race finished was fair and just. That makes me sad for Lewis Hamilton. It also makes me sad for Max Verstappen, because as Braden said, that will always be a part of this story, and that's not fair for him. He should have had an opportunity to win this race clean and fair. He did. Guess what? He wasn't in a position to win that race until Michael Massey rearranged the deck and gave him that advantage. So I think that tarnishes his win, unfortunately. I don't think there's any way around that. And then I'm sad for the fact that I think that this damages the integrity of a sport that I care a lot about. And that's why I'm sad.
You know,
any last thoughts, you guys?
Well, what you just said there, these two guys had 14 1-2 finishes this season. And I think that's just going to continue next year. Like, I don't think
we'll see. New cars, though. Very different design cars. We'll see what happens.
And Lewis is going to come back with a vengeance. And for a guy who's that good behind the wheel, it's going to be a lot of fun next season to watch that. One last thought that can bring you back to a feeling of joy over this race. Tsunoda finished 4th.
Yeah, he shouldn't have, but yeah, good job.
That's pretty awesome. Come on, Tsunoda finished 4th.
That's great.
You guys, that's a big deal. AlphaTauri finished 4th and 5th in this race.
Yeah, they're a good team.
It's very good.
Very good. It's sad to see Kimi Räikkönen not be able to finish his last race. That was definitely sad, but not as sad as the way this finished. Elliot, you want to get one more barb in there? Or are you good?
No, I've riled you up enough.
All right. Well, Braden and I will have more time to talk about this on our final episode of this season's edition of the Pit Stop podcast later this week. We might have Tyler back, Braden. I think we probably
should. Yeah.
I think we've got a lot to discuss. But for now, let's leave it here. That was topic 1. Ho, ho, ho. Happy holidays from the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It is the season of giving, and what better gift to give than some fresh swag from the Ordinary Podcasting merch store. We have a brand new holiday collection, t-shirts and toques, all with special logo designs for the holiday season. You can head over to the Ordinary Podcasting merch store at ordinarypodcasting.com. Check it out. See what's there. This is a very special limited edition run of merchandise that will only be available until the end of 2021. So get over there, grab some fun swag, share it with your friends, promote your favorite podcasts, and let us know what you think on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. All right, on to topic 2. Okay, topic 2. We have neglected one of Canada's other leagues for a long time, actually. I don't think we've talked about them since... I don't even know the last time we talked about the CFL, but regardless, the champ. Oh, here we go already. The CFL has a, well, I shouldn't say a new champion because it's the same champion. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers go back to back, although it's not really back to back when they missed an entire season.
Back
but they
to
were
off to back.
Yeah, they were the champions before COVID, and they're the champions again after COVID, having won the Grey Cup Sunday night against the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who were playing at home. The final score in overtime was 33-25. I don't know if either of you watched this game. I didn't catch much of it. I did actually watch part of the overtime. It just happened to be on. But from the looking at the score line, it looked like a very slow start. 4-0 was the score coming out of the first quarter. And then a couple field goals was all Winnipeg managed in the second and third quarter. But then they had a big fourth quarter to get the game into overtime. So it looked like Hamilton also just kind of sputtering, not a hugely sort of contested game until the end, but overtime's overtime. That's always exciting. I'm sure both of you have thoughts on this, but it does feel a bit mooted after everything we talked about with F1. And I just haven't been bothered by it at all. I found I haven't watched much CFL, if any, at all this year. And I didn't really miss it, but let's see what you guys think. Elliot, do you want to take this first?
Yeah, I'm agree with you. I've struggled with CFL this year as well, mostly because the Elks were garbage and the Elks team is garbage and the organization is garbage and the board needs to rethink its role and how it's taking on the world. But that's a conversation for another day. It's very difficult to watch something when the team that you cheer for is garbage. And if I can say garbage one more time, I will.
We're used to it. We're used to it.
Let me tell you something. September 15th, the Alberta government opened up its online betting, playalberta.ca. You may have heard of it. And they gave you $20 free to bet on any sport that you want. And on September 15th, with odds 8-1, I put $20 on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So I'm cashing out a ticket for $160.
Buddy, congratulations. Hats off to you.
So I have been following because Winnipeg continued to win throughout this year, and that was great. Here's the issue with the Grey. The Grey Cup is a national phenomenon. It's something, there's been 108 of them in the history of that trophy. It is named after our first Lieutenant Governor, Governor General of Canada, or maybe the second. I don't know. But it's
Mr. Cup.
It's a meaningful trophy and a meaningful event that's meant to bring Canadians east and west together. Tonight, I couldn't watch the Grey Cup because it was on a channel that my parents don't have. And that, to me, fundamentally, that the Grey Cup is not accessible to every Canadian home. The last game of the season, the uniting thing about our country in the fall, winter, that being the Grey Cup, was not accessible to me. And it goes back to the monopoly that TSN has over the content and the coverage of the CFL and how it's brought the quality and the standard and everything about the NFL down, or CFL down. And to me, it just, like my dad, who's not a sports fan, was in complete shock that we could not put the Grey Cup on. The one game that he might watch a year, that he would be invested in, he could not watch, and he was in complete shock because of it. It's that, I think, says more than anything else in terms of how poorly the league is run and the impact, the negative impact that the TV monopoly that the TSN has on this game has the impact that it's had. That's my
okay. Let me just jump in here with a quick fact check.
It's not. He wasn't the Governor General, was he? That was
no. He
Lord
was.
Stanley.
He was the 9th.
Okay.
Governor General. Lord Stanley was the 6th.
Okay.
So he was inspired by Lord Stanley, who had previously done it, and I guess there was a tradition of the Governor Generals of the country giving away silver chalices for the purposes of championships.
Anyway, right. So I was better than I thought.
Yeah. You had most of the facts, just not in any of the correct order, but that's okay.
Anyway, that's my take.
You want to jump in? You got your facts in line?
That's unfortunate. Well, I didn't watch too much of the game, but I did start to pick up momentum once Winnipeg came back. It looked like for a good long while there when they were down, 19 to maybe 12, that going into the fourth, they were going to lose. I really did not have expectations here that Winnipeg was going to pull it out. So it's awesome that it ended in a thrilling kind of fashion, and overtime. That's always fun. Big excitement for my buddy Ray, our friend Ray of Winnipeg. But other than that, I'm with you, Elliot. This league kind of sucks. I need somebody to explain to me how 3-down football makes sense anymore. It did not have my attention. Mainly, I guess, because the team that I generally follow wasn't a part of it, but also just the game itself has kind of lost me.
Yeah, me too. It's frustrating. I think I'm kind of perplexed by it. I think I'm surprised, I guess, a little bit in how fast I lost interest. Grew up as a fan of the sport, grew up as a fan of a team in the league, cheered for that team, went to their games, worked for them at one point. We had family season tickets at one point, and it was something that felt very Canadian in the sense that it was this kind of tradition thing that was passed generation to generation in different ways. It had a legacy. It had a place in the culture that I just don't think it holds anymore. And I don't think that has been I don't think that has happened slowly. I think that happened really quickly. I think COVID obviously doesn't help. I think that drove a lot of people who were casual away because there were other things that got them excited and grabbed them. Definitely a younger audience. But as I've said many times on this show, I think the CFL has an identity crisis that it is very quickly succumbing to. And what I mean by that is it does not know what it is. It does not know who its audience should be and how to serve that audience. It feels trapped a little bit in this struggle between its traditionalism, which comes from a more conservative and more, frankly, older generation of fans who like 3-down football, have a relationship with the teams that they cheer for, or relationship with the game itself going back generations. And then I think that it's losing a younger audience because it can't compete with the NFL, nor would it ever be able to, with the way the NFL has grown in the last few decades beyond the monolith that already was, just based on social media and based on the way in which we consume sports and all of the different factors that are playing a part of that. They all become sort of caught up in this constant, I don't know, black hole that it just feels like it's getting sucked into. Now, I know that there's pockets of this country where it's still really important and really valuable as an asset. You know, you're still going to find huge support for the Riders every part of Saskatchewan. You're still going to see huge support for Winnipeg. And I think there was a lot of people in Hamilton who were pretty excited, but that's sort of regionalized. The Argonauts in the big city struggle. The Lions out here in the big city, they struggle. Even the Alouettes, who had such a glorious decade there at the beginning of the 2000s, they're like a non-issue in Montreal. And I think that the CFL really is coming to a crossroads, I think even more desperately than what Elliot was kind of talking about with baseball last week. This idea that, baseball's huge. Baseball's not going anywhere. The CFL very well could be on a path to extinction here as a league. Like, they are very, very precariously treading towards what could be the end of a glorious history with a lot of really important storylines. But I'm not trying to be dramatic when I say I can see an end to this league if they can't figure out what's next. And I don't think the way they're going right now is what's next. I don't know. I think you're right, Elliot. I think TSN is actually less helpful for them than they think. But unfortunately, there's nobody else out there. I mean, Sportsnet has no interest in the CFL right now.
I mean, but the CBC could be making a play at this. I think it's Canadian content, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be broadcasting a national game at least once a week.
Or once a year, just throw the Grey Cup
again,
together.
TSN's not going to give it away. It's the only asset they have in Canadian content right now.
You could have a partnership with multi-platform.
Yeah,
you could. But again, is it a valuable enough asset for that to be?
Well, if it's about accessibility, if you just lost this whole household because they couldn't watch it, then absolutely it is.
Yeah. But TSN still sold their ads regardless of that. I guess all
I think we'll see.
But you're talking about this.
I mean, that's the most valuable thing, right? That's the most valuable
eyes on it.
Is the Grey Cup, right? That's the thing that's hard to give up. So I totally get that, but I still don't think anyway. I made my point already. You know how I feel about this. I'm so fed up with it.
Yeah, I think the CFL, as I said, has an identity crisis it needs to solve, and I know there's a lot of fans out there who might take umbrage with that, but the truth is, you are a part of a very quickly dwindling fan base if you're still calling yourself an active CFL fan.
Unless you live in Saskatchewan, in which case your probably numbers are rising.
No, but the point being, who's Saskatchewan going to play when all these other markets fold because they can't sustain a team? It doesn't matter if one market's successful. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The league has to survive. When you have a league this small, what is it, 6 teams, 7 teams? Like, it's
easy for us, though, to be cynical and down on it because our team's shitty as hell. I'm sure Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
I don't even know if I would still call that my team. Like, I have no emotional investment left in that team. So I look at I live in this city and I'm not
maybe
cheering for the Lions, but I look at the Lions and I think to myself, like, this organization is in trouble. You know what I mean?
Well, the Elks here. I mean, it's a disaster. And the board what they've done. Like, the board is not self-aware enough to realize that they are way too invested in the football operations of this thing. They need another level in this organization. I mean, we could have a whole conversation on the Elks and what I think the problem is here, but to sum it up, is that the board has too much control. They're like nosy owners in that you see in other jurisdictions. I mean, what we need is a president of football operations that hires the GM.
They hire someone by the name of Wally Buono recently.
Yeah, to go through the search, but it's just a temporary thing until they find a real general manager. I mean, but there's a mess here. There's a mess here. They need another level. They need a president that reports to the board, and a president who hires a GM, and a GM that does the football stuff. And the president might have some say or there, but really reports to the board. That's the problem. The board is too close to the general manager, too invested in day to day, and it's very clearly a problem.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with one thing, Elliot, when you said it about that team, but I think it's true of the entire CFL. I think there's too many people involved at the higher levels here who are not self-aware enough about the struggles and dangers that their league is in. I think that's the problem. And they're
a useless commission. They've got a useless commission.
Yeah, they're in a bit of an echo chamber, and they're not seeing that they are taking on significant water. All right, well, congratulations to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Regardless, they are the Grey Cup champions in 2001. And you for your big bet win. That's a big one. So look in the new year, Elliot. She'll be launching a betting podcast here on the network with all kinds of hot tips and takes.
What do we always say? What do we always say? Hashtag Tanty
Polling. Do you or someone you know own a small business? Are you looking to grow or to reach new customers? Hey, why not let us help? Hattrick is looking for unique brands, businesses, and products to advertise on our show. You can find out how we can help spread the word about your business by contacting us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. To round out our trilogy of misery today, we have dedicated the third topic to the struggling Edmonton Oilers. They have dropped 5 in a row. They are obviously still suffering from a myriad of injured players, mostly on the back end. There are a few bright spots. We can get to those in a second, but not many. They seem to be in that. They seem to have gotten trapped a little bit in that place that sometimes good teams get when they go on a skid. And what I mean by that is they play well enough to win, but don't actually get over the hump. They're just a goal away, or they're one depth goal away, or they're one, big save away from what they should be winning. They had a game the other night where they put 40 shots on the net and they lose. That's a good effort on most nights, but there's something missing. There's something either not quite right or just not quite clicking. And that's what we're going to dig into here. Obviously it's too early, I think, to hit the panic button, but whenever you're an Oiler fan, whenever you're a fan
you're
of most
always
Canadian
in panic
teams,
mode.
Well, there's scar tissue, right? Look at what happened here in Vancouver after their skid. They hit the panic button, and they made some big changes. I'm not suggesting that that's happening in Edmonton yet, but 5 in a row is not great. Now, luckily for the Oilers, they had a fantastic start, and they've spotted themselves a few extra points to be able to weather a little bit of this. And I would also, as I have said many times to my wife, suggest that it's better to have this happen in December than in March. So let's start there. I'll go to Braden first. How you feeling as an Oilers fan this week?
Yeah, nervous for sure. It's frustrating to watch any game where they are lose. I mean, to be fair, they played some really steep competition that they haven't faced in this season, and certainly not last season. When it comes to the likes of the Carolina Hurricanes, the Minnesota Wild are having a stellar season. The Bruins are good, and they've got stiffer competition coming up with the Leafs, and even the Ducks are really good right now. So it's not going to change. Nothing's going to change. What's going to have to kind of happen is they're going to have to get back on the horse and figure out how to put the puck in the net like they were doing so well at the beginning of the season. I really hope that the injection of Mike Smith back into the lineup this week, knock on wood, that happens, changes some things and at least inspires a bit more from the offense. But they can't lose. They can't lose, man. They just can't lose. And 5 in a row is not a good thing.
First time they've lost 5 in a row, I believe, since 2019. Elliot.
Yeah, so there's 3 things here that I'd point to. One, this consistency, that they consistently have bad starts in games. They've been scored on majority of games, way more than the majority of games. Yeah, especially in the last little bit, they've been the first one the goal against. So terrible starts. It puts them in awful positions where they're chasing games, which leads to my second thing, which is that they're forced to double shift and spend more time putting Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl lines out there, whether they're together or apart, which causes issues in the rotation in the back end, particularly the bottom 6. and we've seen the bottoming out of the bottom six again this year in Edmonton. And someone has to wonder if maybe this is not structural. Maybe it's not the players that we're bringing in to be in the bottom six. Maybe it's the way in which the lines are being run and the way in which the games are playing out. And I think that there's a question there, because this is what, 3, 4, 5 seasons in a row that we've seen just decently, we know players with decent sort of third and fourth line characteristics in other teams come to Edmonton and not be able to do it. And we're certainly seeing that again here. And then the third thing I'll point to, and I wish someone before the season had maybe made this point, but we've basically gutted the depth of our defense, and we had substantial issues with injuries in the back end of this team. And it was fun to see Broberg and Niemelainen and these guys and Legason come in and play big minutes and see where they're at in their careers. That only worked for so long. And I think it's had a significant impact on the team in terms of the outcomes. And they are still strapped on the back end. And I think Darnell Nurse is playing hurt just because they literally cannot afford to have as many defenses they have out. And it's really impacting the team. And we're seeing that. They gutted depth. And we all had different opinions on that over the summer, and they're paying the price because they're getting hurt on the back end. They're banged up on the back end right now. And that's what's impacted the last things. So I think those are the three things: bad starts, but bottom six that's not performing, and lack of defensive depth. And that's what's really damaging the team right now.
Yeah, I think all those things are fair. I think with a healthier, you can't control health. You can't control injuries. That they're going to happen every team, right? So you're right, Elliot. Depth is valuable. It's hard to build out depth anticipating this kind of onslaught of injuries. I think last week at one point they had one healthy defenseman from the group of defensemen who had started the season for them, because I think Cody Ceci had COVID or was in COVID protocol. So although he wasn't injured, he still wasn't playing. So yeah, that's not going to go well. He's like you are trying to field an NHL team. But I would also argue that we've also seen just overall sort of, and this is a term we don't use very much in the NHL, but like the form of most of the roster go through a bit of a cold spell or like a cold streak, like even the top guys have had less success in the last couple weeks than they had in November. And that every team would struggle under those circumstances. Yes, the Edmonton Oilers rely very heavily on their top six, but that's not unlike a lot of teams in the NHL. The Calgary Flames, who are obviously ahead of the Oilers right now in the standings, are relying a lot on a guy named Giappani to score the majority of their goals.
A third line winger. Yeah.
Yeah. But the point being, wherever you get your offense from, you got to get your offense, and they're just not getting it. What's frustrating is, again, that they are generating chances. They are having some bad luck, and they're also coming up against good goaltending. I think that's the other thing about like not panicking here. If you actually watch these games and you actually look beyond just the stat line, you can see that the Oilers aren't rolling over here. They aren't being completely chased out of the barn. For the majority of these games, they're in the game. Often they do have a slow start. That's maybe a coaching thing. Maybe that's just a preparation thing. I don't know. It is interesting to see. It will be interesting to see if they can figure that piece of it out. I would make one argument against you, Elliot, in terms of like, it's just fun to see some of these rookies. I think they've actually discovered a diamond in the rough here with Marcus Niemelainen. I think this guy surprised them. Yeah. And I think that he offers something to this defense that they have not had, which is grit. In a while. I mean, Darnell Nurse is a big guy, but he's not the first guy to throw the check. He's a much more strategic defenseman when he's playing in his own zone. He is an offensive defenseman first. I think that's fair to say. But Niemelainen I think he's out hit the entire roster since he's been called up. And as a rookie, to have that kind of confidence to go out there and say, this is what I offered the team, I'm going to go out there and do that. I think there's value in that. And those are the kind of performances we need from some of the depth guys as they're trying to weather this storm, is to not only, show up and do the best they can, but to do the little things right. And that's how you work your way out of it. So
it certainly helps when he's 6'8".
Oh, he's a very big boy.
He's a very large man.
No, he's a revelation for sure. And it's exciting to finally have someone in here. I mean, I'm just going through stats right now. Warren Fogle, 2 goals. Devin Shore, 1 goal. Kyle Turris, 1 goal. Those guys, who was the other one I had here? Derek Ryan, 1 goal. Those guys all together combined have less goals than Milan Lucic on Calgary. So yes, Mangiapane's doing something, but they also have a third line that's
absolutely. No, I won't. The Edmonton Oilers' depth has definitely gone cold. They had a good start to the season. I think Warren Fogel's goals were in the first 3 or 4 games.
Yeah.
He came out of preseason hot, and then it went away. You're absolutely right. And that's going to happen.
On
the question
defensive zone,
what do we need from those guys, right? You're asking
that's what you're getting
out of one of those guys.
Yeah.
And you're not.
I'm asking for 50-50. If you go out and you
Yeah.
have the same amount of goals for as against, whether it's 0, whether it's 1, whether it's 2, I don't care. But what you need, because our top 6 is going to beat their top 6 9 times out of 10 in the season. You know what? As long as our fourth line draws even and our third line draws even, our second line is better than their second line, and our first line is better than their first line against 90% of the teams in this league. And that's not happening. That's not happening.
Yep.
So where's the biggest weakness right now?
Between the years.
I would say it's between the pipes.
I don't agree with that. I think that
well,
there has
you
been
keep talking about early goals against that. What else is that?
Well, that's the entire team not having a hot start.
Come on.
You watch those
it's
goals. It's
happened time and time again.
Yeah, on bad turnovers.
Man.
Yeah, but he hasn't been giving up the first goal. He's making saves. And more importantly, Braden, go watch the highlights from that game the other night against who did they play on?
Carolina.
Yeah, Carolina. Thank you. Go watch the highlights of that game against Carolina. And until the bad bounce off the end board, which I'm sorry, that's going to happen once in a while. There's nothing he can do. That's a routine play. He's going to the same place every time he goes there. It came off the board's funny, unfortunate bounce. But up until that point, he kept that team in that game. He had huge saves on 2 or 3 odd man rushes. One that was point blank to Sebastian Aho and made a huge save with the pad. He is definitely improved on the performances we saw from him last year. And I think that, again, like when you have the lack of depth offense that we have, and more importantly, when you have the depleted defense and a lot of rookie defensemen in front of you, those goaltenders are being asked to do a lot more than they should be on this team. And I think that is skewing that somewhat. I think Stuart Skinner played well in the first couple of games, and then he fell back to being a rookie. But the truth is, he's kept the Oilers in games. The last 4 games of this losing streak are all games the Oilers should have won. We're capable of winning, and most nights they should have had that extra goal or 2 extra goals that they just couldn't find. And I don't think you can blame that on goaltending.
Fair, okay, but we've now seen that Stuart Skinner can play in the NHL. I think that at least as a backup.
He's still a backup, yeah.
So now you've got an excess of goaltenders once Mike Smith comes back, and they're certainly
we don't know
not
what Mike
getting rid
Smith
of
is
him.
going to be when he comes back.
Well,
we don't know what he's going to be, right?
That's fair.
Apparently, it's an ankle
you've got
injury.
$4.5
the guy's had an ankle injury all
Mikko
of last year.
And how are you going to do anything this season in terms of improving or bringing in anything to help if you've got that kind of contract sitting on the bench?
You're not.
So you're moving Koskinen by the deadline.
No, you're not moving any of those goaltenders. I'm telling you right now, that's my hot take right now. There is not a goaltender available out there that is better than what these 2 guys or these 3 guys together are offering you.
Maybe I don't want a
trading first goalies.
Maybe I don't want a goalie.
So you just want to move Mikko Koskinen for cap space is what you're saying.
I want cap space, absolutely, because you're talking about scoring goals.
Maybe, but they're not bringing in a goalie. That's, I guess, what I'll say. There isn't a goalie to be had.
I mean, I don't know. Like I sort of feel like, Braden, sometimes I think we're harder on the goaltending than we should be. Like,
I'm not goaltending in general. I'm saying Koskinen.
Yeah, Koskinen's 908 this year. That's a save percentage, 908, which is a little bit lower than the league average in terms of, but that was much higher before the end of the season. Mike Smith's went 920, Stuart Skinner, both those guys much smaller, so 918. I mean, I do think there have been a couple. You're just going to have to accept that you're going to get a bad goal from Mikko Koskinen once every 2 games, sort of. That's sort of where we're at with.
And in a 2-1 game.
And in a 2-1 game or a 3-1 game or a 3-2 game, that can be a difference maker for sure. I don't disagree with you on that front. But you've also got a team that is capable of scoring 4, 5, 6 goals any night too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think in the first part of the season, what you saw is the Oilers outscoring their mistakes. I mean, let's also not forget their power play is nowhere near as hot as it was to start the season. And so those outscoring the mistakes has become a lot harder when you're not potting 2 or 3 power play goals a night, right? Teams have sort of figured that out. I mean, the other thing is, I think this changing the subject and moving away from goaltending, I just want to add here is that the Oilers are a good team, and players are coming in, and other teams are coming in and bringing their best show every night because they know they're playing against like what they think is a top 10 league team in the league, top 8 team in the league. And the Oilers, people were like, wow, they're good. Yeah, they've made changes that have worked. Zach Hyman is working out, and so they're playing the best of their opponent every night too, and that's had an impact as well.
Yeah, I want to give you one weird statistic that I do think is playing a factor in the perception of this team. The Edmonton Oilers have 10 losses on the season, not a single one of them in overtime.
Yeah.
So they have not gotten any of those half-point games. They're not getting a little bit of bump in the standings because they're not getting games they're losing into overtime, or they're losing games in regulation. And that is something I think that, not that, like they are literally at 0 and they are first in the league in that category, which is not a category you want to be leading in necessarily, but they've also been in 2 shootouts and they've won them both. So they're not seeing a lot of extra time to begin with. Games that they're getting to overtime, they're either winning in overtime or they've had those 2 shootout wins. But, the goal differential for this team is only 8, right? So they scored 88 goals and they've let in 80 goals. So, there's definitely room to improve on the goals against part of it. And maybe that is, as Elliot said, maybe that's defense or maybe that's structural, but I don't know. I think, again, I personally think it's too early to be hitting the panic button. I think every good team goes through a patch where they are figuring some things out, whether it's weathering some adversity from injuries or whether it's, again, just coming up against, a little bit of, fatigue, and they something isn't quite clicking. I remember a certain St. Louis team that I think going into the February of the year that they were playing was last in the division, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup. So, adversity isn't always the worst thing if you can weather it and if you can turn it around. And that is the big question mark here for the Oilers in December, is can they find a way to right the ship moving into the new year, use this as a learning opportunity and a growing opportunity, and improve again. And we'll see, I guess, right? Last thoughts, Braden?
Just something noted that the top line changed that game after Pittsburgh. Yamamoto moved up to the top line, Puljujarvi down to the third line, and I wonder if we see another shift again with Puljujarvi back up to the top line here after 5 games losing, to see if they can return to some sort of normalcy.
Elliot?
Couple big games against difficult teams. Toronto on Tuesday, Columbus on Thursday. I mean, you don't want to stretch 5 into 6 or into 7. And this is a 6-game homestand that they have a chance. There's a chance they might not pick up a single game at home in the 6-game homestand, and that would be a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that would definitely be bad. One other statistical anomaly I will point out: they are at 31.7%. Elliot mentioned that the power play has slowed down, but it's still best in the league. So
That's
they're
crazy.
the things are still working. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot.
They just have to get on the power play, though.
And frankly, they're in the top 10 in penalty kill too. They're at 82.7%. I think they're, well, I've got 9th in front of me, but maybe it's 8th. So, regardless, they're in the top 10 on both of those special team categories, and those are often the deciding factors. So again, they just got to figure out 5-on-5 depth scoring a little bit better than they have, and we'll see if that's something you can do mid-season. But sometimes you just got to ask those, you just have to expect that there's more out of your players, and we'll see if they can find that next gear and if they can get out of it. Well, I feel like we worked our way out of a bit of a slump. It was a slow and emotionally low day for a few of us as sports fans, but thank you both for being here with me, and it was very cathartic. It felt good to vent and to rail against the CFL. But anyway, regardless, another fun week. And we'll be back next week with some more fun stuff for you. Brady, Elliot, thank you very much. That was Hattrick. Hattrick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman. And follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm going to let you guys go in, then I'll do the Christmas merch ad, as I apparently am the only one who likes it.
I like it. I love it.
Right on. The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.